Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your comfort break and you got a suitable cup of tea or coffee or beverage of your choice. Just a quick thank you again to Pelsis for sponsoring us again for today's webinar. As long as obviously, don't forget the slides that we have as well with all your member benefits and the great products that Pelsis are offering. Also, don't forget the mice. The mice win prizes. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who is going to yeah, put us off our Christmas stuffing.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Niall. Yeah, I'm here. I work for Pelsis. I am a technical trainer, so I provide lots of information about pest control and also the products that we supply that can help you in your pest management. So yeah, thank you BPCA for having us. We always love presenting, so it's great to be here. And I'll share my slides. So here we go. Hopefully we can see that okay.
Yeah, all working fine.
Thank you. Oh, it's so good to have just that kind of confirmation sometimes. Thank you very much. So because it is Christmas, I thought I when I thought about Christmas last year, that came to mind. There was a story that broke about Tesco having to recall some stuffing that was being sold at that time of year because of moths. And so I thought, why not do a topic on store product insects, specifically on our moths that will infest our food because it seemed to be relevant. Okay, so that's why I've gone for this strange title, A Moth Full of Stuffing, because literally in every mouthful there might have been a moth. You never know, but they did recall it, so there was no issue of it actually getting to consumers. They recalled it, and so that people were safe. So this was the headline. September last year, it got brought out, but it was to do with our Christmas stuffing that was being going to be manufactured for last year's Christmas dinner. Um, and of course, because of the material in there, we've got lots of like flour, we've got lots of food particles, lots of like nutritious value for the moths. They love this kind of food material. Stuffing, particularly, I think is one of the key things that they like. But store product moths love things like, again, like biscuits. Here we've got another example of another food supplier having to recall their biscuits because they found moths again in their biscuits. But anything where you're producing things made from cereal and grain and wheat, so crackers, biscuits. I've seen them with chocolate as well because you get like biscuity bits and chocolate. Also, just cocoa powder is a great food source for some of these moths. You can get moth activity in, I'm trying to think where I've been. I've seen lots of moths. Tortilla making, so tortilla chips. They are great as well for supporting moths. Chocolate factories, to name a few. I know a few have had moth issues. Anyway, we've got bread production, cakes, biscuits, even in distilleries, more breweries, sorry, like making beer because of course we bring in grain. And I found moth activity there. So because these moths can survive on so many different types of food material, even if you're not working in big manufacturing facilities, like big production sites, there's still a risk because they can survive on lots of different food that could be just stored in a warehouse. And even if, the food goes in and out quite quickly, in that warehouse where you have like breakfast cereals potentially, again, moths could be brought in with those and cause issues long term on the site. Okay, so when we talk about the issues we have with moths, we can have things like physical loss of the commodity. So the moths are feeding on it. We have less produced, so that we less to sell onwards. We get a loss of product quality. And that's because when you think about it, that eating the nutrition inside the food. A mill I went to a few years ago, they tell me all about the different grains that they use in their production, and they know very specifically how much nutrition comes from each different grain around the world. So the amount of energy, protein, vitamins, minerals inside the grain. And actually, if you have insects eating on this food, you are changing the quality within it. And that will really impact the food that you produce at the end. So if I had a moth infestation at a mill and I bought some of their flour, that flour would probably not make the best cakes or the best bread or pizza dough because the nutritional quality has been affected. I'm not gonna get as good a rise on my cakes. Actually, it's really poor quality to then actually be used in food production. And if you are a big manufacturer of food, that is really important because you want to make sure when you sell your product, people taste it and they know it's tastes like how it normally does. It tastes nice. It's, the same as it was 5 years ago. You don't have like an off biscuit, let's say. So it's very different from me buying one bag of flour for a whole food production site. When it affects every single product they produce, they have to be spot on with what exactly is in their ingredients so that they always have it nice and safe. And also on their labels, it's accurate. Okay. Some of the worst things about moths is that actually, because when you have moths inside your food products, they respire, they produce CO2 just like humans would. They are respiring. They may not have breathe in and out like we do with lungs. They have the spiracles instead on the body cuticle. But they produce moisture as another byproduct of respiration. The water that they produce raises the humidity and it makes it more likely that you get mold growth and even the growth of mycotoxins. So, molds that could be harmful to human health could have a toxic effect. Again, that would affect your product quality, your nutritional value, but it leads to further infestations down the line potentially when you have insects that are mold feeders or book lice that come in and start eating the mold. So you could end up with a secondary infestation after you've introduced your moths. Not only that, we have things like you get parts of the insects, so legs, moths, like the physical bodies. We get even fragments. We have the frass they produce. So frass, in the picture here, you can see my moth larva and you can see the webbing, the silk that they produced. When it gets mixed with the insect's feces and also like food particles that drop out of the mouth of the insect, then you get this frass appearing that kind of gets mixed all together and it's quite grainy. But inside there, you don't want that inside the machinery because it could clog it. You don't want it in the food products, anything like that. And when you think about producing food, having infestations can be very costly because we spend a lot of time and energy to get it to this kind of final product like flour or, for example, bread, a cracker, a biscuit. We've spent a lot of time preparing the field, sowing the field with seeds, growing the plants, harvesting the plants, then storing it. And then right at the end, if we suddenly get infestations of moths, we've wasted a lot of time and energy and money in that production. So we kind of think of that whole farm to fork analogy. And actually, if you get infestations right at the end, in that kind of just before they get eaten, is the most costly part, really, in the whole process because we've spent so much time and energy in the preceding parts to get it to this product. Okay, so can cause many, many issues. When we look at pictures of a moth, here's my typical moth. It's an Infestia moth. We've got wings, of course. They actually have a scaled wing, which is where we get the name Lepidoptera from, where we talk about butterflies and moths. So collectively, they're known as Lepidoptera, and they all have these scaled wings. As they get older, they do lose these scales, and if you ever see like this kind of like dust come off the moth, there's actually some of the scales that's also being lost. And so if you have an old moth, you actually lose the pattern a little bit and it's harder to identify them. But when they're brand new, when they freshly emerged from their pupa, they're quite easy to identify because they've got a nice clear pattern on the scales. When you look at the wings, we've got a forewing and a hind wing. This is stretched out. So when it's actually resting, they don't ever really look like this. When they're resting, they'll have the wings bent over their back, and you'll have the forewing resting on top of the hind wing. Of course, they've got a head. They've got antenna. Antenna are extremely important for all insects. They're very good for sensing odor, and they use that for, detecting other moths, communicating with them using pheromones. But it's also very useful for detecting food, and the labial palps will also use that. They also use that as a touch and a taste sense. Okay. Insects, we split them into the three body parts. So at the top, like I said, we've got the head. We then have our thorax, which is in the middle, which the wings and the legs usually attach to. And then we've got the abdomen at the bottom half of the insect. Okay. Of course, all insects have three pairs of legs. That's a defining feature, and moths are no different. Okay, so that's our adult moth. But then here is our larva form, and it looks very, very different. Most people will be much more familiar with the adults because they are visually more accessible. The larva will spend most of the time in the food. And so when they're like this creamy color, they're gonna be very hard to see because they camouflage really, really well. Additionally, where they don't like light, so they'll be hidden like in a dark spot, usually maybe around the packaging and a crease you might find the larva. But the moths, because they're flying, they're airborne, you're much more likely to spot those. But identifying the larva as a moth larva is really, really essential. So moth larvae compared to beetles are usually longer. They have this head, and it's usually this kind of orangey color. They've got mandibles or mouth parts on the head to allow them to eat lots of different food. We've got, again, our 6 legs or 3 pairs of legs here. We still have a thorax, which is this part here, but it's very hard to tell the difference between the thorax and the abdomen because it kind of looks quite continuous in this example of the larva. Moths will also have prolegs, so that is a nice feature to look out for. They will help the moth to crawl along. So when you think about a moth and a caterpillar, they kind of go through in this kind of motion. I hope you can see that. And the prolegs help them to move in that way to actually crawl long distances. Okay. But they're really much made for eating. If you look at the form, they haven't spent any time or energy producing wings. They're very simple features, simple structures, because this form is not their ultimate form for reproduction. The moth form, the adult, they spend all their time flying, if possible, finding a mate, and so that's why they've invested a lot more time into production of wings. At this stage, they rarely eat, if ever, depending on the species, usually not at all. Most of them don't even drink. The Infestia will occasionally drink, but when you have some of the moths, like the Indian meal moth or Plodia, they never need to drink, and so it just shows you how evolutionary they've kind of devoted so much time to these different forms to allow them to kind of capture different parts of the life cycle which benefit them long term. Okay, so like I talked about, we've got the adults, you've got the winged forms. That's what we mainly think of when we think of a moth. They lay eggs. The eggs hatch, and we get that larva form, which will be crawling, feeding. It will then go into this pupa form. On the side, I've got cocoon. I actually prefer the word pupa because you can use it more across lots of different groups of insects. And in that pupa form or cocoon, they will basically break down the whole body and then build it back up into this beautiful moth or beautiful butterfly, beautiful moth. And it's quite amazing. They literally will deconstruct the whole anatomy of the body and then build the structure back up. But it's still the same moth. I once read something that when they used so I think it was color, and they had the larva being fed under a certain light. So it was kind of reinforcing this positive relationship with the color. As adults, when the moths emerged, they still went to this color. So they still remember things from their larval form, even though they've basically broken down the whole body and built it back up, which is quite amazing. Um, Now, I know we know insect life cycles. We know moths, butterflies, egg, larva, pupa, adult. I like to show this still though, because when we're thinking about moths, we're thinking about while they feed differently, we know the moths as adults they don't feed, but the larvae spend a lot of time feeding. They'll be moving differently. One's flying, one's crawling. They'll be occupying like different areas inside the building. The adult moths will likely end up quite high in the building where it's warm and also allow them to fly a little bit easier. Whereas the larvae will be hidden somewhere dark, quite warm still, but they'll be trying to find somewhere safe to be, and that might be underneath the machinery, behind different yeah features inside the production facility, even like in the bags on the seams of the bag. And so they pose different pest risks, and they need to be treated differently. We could put up lots and lots of different monitors. We could do lots of spraying or application of insecticides if it's, things like aquapide might be useful. But most of the time that's not targeting our larval form because they will be in the food hidden and they're not going to be targeted as easily. Okay. So that's why I like to keep illustrating it. So our main pest species we've got this one, Indian mealmoth or Plodia interpunctella. I would say this is like your number one moth you're going to come across. It's very much widespread across the world, but in the UK, I find it very common. And it's got this distinctive pattern on the wings, which helps. It's kind of got this reddish brown pattern on the bottom of the wings, and then this kind of grayish upper part of the wings. It's called a snout-nosed moth, actually. And all our pest moths, if they're infesting food, are snout-nosed moths. They all have like very small face parts on the top. And we've got things like cereals, nuts, dried fruit, but like I said, cocoa powder, I found them in chocolate factories. I found them in so many different places because this one can feed on a wider range of different things. Okay. Size-wise, I'd say they're around 10 to 15 millimeters long. So they're not big, they're not massive. I mean, I know I talk about they're much more easy to spot as an adult compared to larva, but you're still looking for a small insect. Is when people think about a moth or butterfly, they think something quite large, whereas these moths have adapted to really blend into like food materials, not be spotted as easily. And when they're flying, they're not like taking big wing beats. They're much more fluttery, and they do get up high in the building, but they're not. I wouldn't describe them as really strong flyers compared to something like a housefly, which is very good at flying around. The larva has really strong mandibles. It can bite through plastic, cardboard, and so if you're thinking about how is it getting into food material, it can actually chew through it. And I also say that because sometimes on different parts of like packaging, you will see small holes, and that's probably the moth exiting the food material to then go find somewhere to pupate. Okay. The larva is like this creamy white color. They do actually sometimes go a bit pinkish or yellow depending on the food material. So do check out for that. So that's number one. Number two is our Mediterranean flower moth. And this one's got this like grayish pattern on the wings and this black zigzag pattern across it. It is a larger moth, I find, compared to our Indian meal moth. It's just a little bit longer in the body. Again, it feeds on lots of different things like flour, nuts, animal feed, biscuits, any kind of like food material and animal feed can be utilized by this moth for food, for growth, for survival. Okay. When you think about the behavior of these moths, we tend to notice that adults will rest during the day and they'll start to see like fly at dusk. And that's a strategic part for them to mate all together. They will rest during the day and then most of them will start flying at dusk so that they can find each other and mate. This does get interrupted though in like if you have production facilities that are 24 hours where you have like lights on constantly, you'll start to affect the behavior because they don't have their natural circadian rhythm being reinforced by light level. You still may tend to see this where they'll start to fly a bit more later in the day. Sometimes you also get like a flying pattern like at dawn break as well. Um, but I'm saying this in case like you get to pick what time you go inspect and you can't see anything. You might be able to find them easier at certain parts of the day because you'll see more activity occurring. Like I said, the adults don't need to feed. This one might take a bit of water occasionally. So I have found moths nearby water sources that have been left out. That those water sources did not need to be there. They should have been removed, but might help you to identify some where they are potentially. With this larva, you can see that the spiracles, it's got these dots all over the body. Those are the spiracles, they're coloured in. And that can help you to tell the difference between our Festia cuniella or our Plodia interpunctella, which doesn't have these spiracles coloured in. Okay. These are your main two. There are a few more store product moths. I'm not going to go into massive details. So there's another two Infestia ones out there. One's called a tobacco or chocolate moth, Infestia alitella. And then there's also an almond moth. It's got a few different common names. That's an Infestia cortella. That used to be called Cadra cortella, but everything's kind of being tidied up naming wise. Um, they're quite hard to tell the difference between these ones and, of course, our Mediterranean flower moth. With Elitella, it can be particularly tricky because they have this, again, like black marks on the wings and then this grayish pattern. What someone once said, it looked like a grumpy man, and I can't not see that now. So I hope that helps to tell the difference of Elitella as compared to Cornelia. But yeah, it kind of looks like someone frowning. Here's the nose, or that could be your eyes, and that's like an upset mouth there. And yeah, I do see a face now. Okay, so I can maybe help you to tell the difference. Here are some signs of our moth's activity. We've got like the larva. Again, like when you have like a seam, they really like that to hide in, and you might find the silk being built up there, and even the moths using the silk. Here's some frass. So here's an example of someone holding it, but here's it just on a table, and it's really clumped together. This is like a mixture of the webbing, food material, droppings, dead moths, all clumping together. I did take a bit of that, put it in a jar, and over the next 2 months, I ended up having hundreds of moths emerge. So there's eggs in there as well. Here are the pupa, and you can see still have got this bit of silk around it. This is quite a new pupa, I'd say, and they will harden more, but until they're like ready to emerge. Okay. There's some obvious signs, like if you see that, that's great. Some less obvious places I found them. So here on top left was where we did have a pupa, and then it's been removed, but people haven't cleaned up after. I could tell there was one there. This is on the bottom of a rat trap, and you can see the pupa again. But the moths are crawled, some are dark. They've been able to form this kind of cocoon around them, and they're actually pupating in the grooves underneath the rat trap. Any kind of surface, they love like an edge or where you get a horizontal surface meet a vertical surface. That's great. And here's a water source. The larvae are actually in this food and gaining moisture from the food as well. They don't need it, like I said, they can survive without moisture. When I had kept some Indian meal moth, we never watered them, then they were fine. So they don't need moisture at all. So I'm telling you all about these moths because they can be extremely, um, has some real negative consequences for a company. So I have found this example that a food milling company in Bradford were ordered to pay fines of more than £22,000 after hygiene inspectors uncovered premises infested with moths and equipment covered in caterpillar or larva droppings. Now that was back in 2013. I imagine that fine would now go up 10 years later, be more expensive. But for a food production facility, that can be very costly. Okay. Here's a picture they showed with the article. You can see the webbing and the flower. The flower, when you are producing it kind of will become airborne and then it will settle in lots of different areas. And if they're not cleaning, this is a great place for the moths to end up because the food is kind of landing there on a surface and they just need to crawl along it and start feeding on it. And you can see the webbing kind of hanging down. Almost looks like snow. How pretty. Um, but when you're cleaning, you have to be really specific to make sure like every kind of bit of food is removed, any kind of dust. Mice, we often talk about this, mice only need 3 grams of food every day to survive. 3 grams of food is an absolutely tiny amount. If that's what a mouse needs, what does a moth need to survive? And it's milligrams of food, okay? So you have to be really thorough with the cleaning to help remove any kind of food surface, food material that could deposit and accumulate. And when I say clean, like we're thinking every day at least, maybe twice a day, and not just like doing the areas you see, because that's what people do. Oh yeah, I've cleaned, and they just do everything that they see. They don't go underneath machinery. They don't look in dark spaces. They don't go behind things. They just clean what they see. And you have to be really thorough to make sure we're removing every type of food. Okay. And you can also remove the moths at the same time of cleaning. Now, I've started the next bit. Well, I'm running out of time already. So I asked AI to do me a population growth chart for Indian meal moth. Now, I think they've gone a bit extreme with the numbers here, but I put in like if they'd had a life cycle at from egg to adult in 40 days to go through the whole life cycle, and that only took 30 days, and a single female laid 300 eggs. These are quite reasonable statistics. This is what AI would think would happen with your population growth. And like I said, I think it's a bit extreme, but you start very, very small with only 10. And after 60 days, even if we take the conservative estimate, they estimate you've got between 1,000 and 10,000 moths 60 days later, which I think is really extreme. But population growth can be really, really rapid. And so you need to tackle moth infestations very early on. And to do that, you need good monitoring tools. Okay, so here's my example of a great monitoring tool. Here we have a pheromone trap, and you can see the moths absolutely love it. When we have moth pheromone traps, you peel the back. You don't really have an odor associated with it. We can't detect it, but the moths, for them, it is a beacon. They are very responsive to these pheromones. Okay. And what is happening here is this trap is mimicking a female pheromone that is produced. So when females produce this pheromone, they're basically calling, they're saying, hello, I'm here, I'm ready to mate, to enter the next stage of my life cycle. Okay. And so they produce this pheromone, this odor, and they're very volatile. So they get pushed out in wind currents very easily, and it creates this kind of cloud of pheromone. The male moth is very responsive to this. That's why we've got the antenna. And they will do this kind of sweeping motion, this zigzag, where they go up and down, up and down. And they're basically trying to get to the female moth following the concentration gradient. So they want to go to the highest concentration where the female moth is. And what we've done is we've taken that pheromone and made synthetic versions of it to put into our different monitors. Here is a female moth, and she's actually producing that pheromone. You can see she's got her abdomen raised. Oh, I'll play it. Her abdomen raised at the bottom, and she is actually producing that pheromone to call to the male. Okay. She's a plodium moth as well. Okay, so if you see females do this, you'll see them usually quite high up in a building, but you see them in this weird stance, and that's what they're doing. They're calling to the males. So what we've done is we've put that pheromone in lots of different traps. Now, all of these will use the same pheromone, but they use it in different ways. So we've got like a funnel kit, we've got a delta stripe trap, we've got SP locator, which is to be used like maybe lower down. Sometimes the moths will end up low down. You might need something that's more like a crawling insect monitor. Okay. And we're using them to highlight areas of activity to pinpoint particular issues, or whether it's related to a particular room, production room, or a piece of equipment. And these monitors, they're not going to control the infestation, but they're going to help you to detect the problem earlier and take action much quicker. Okay, so we've got incoming goods areas, manufacturing or production areas. We've got maybe even connecting corridors and passageways. These are all need to be included in your monitoring system so that you can detect where the moths are turning up. Okay, the more moth activity, the more likely is that that's where we need to focus on firstly. Okay, place them in a convenient location. I say that because you need to check them. If they're not placed in a convenient place, how are you going to check them? Try not to put them at the top end of prevailing air movements. Oh no, they should be positioned there. And that's because, of course, they're volatile. We want that pheromone to be released. So if you have it near an air movement, it will help the pheromone to actually move out of the trap. If you've got a particularly high roof, you may need to have the monitors up very high. So think about that as well. Like I said, the moths like to travel upwards. We've got a density here. We've got in a 600 cubic meter room. We presume we'd have one trap every 600 cubic meters. With that, if you think about it, it's 10 by 10 for 6 meter height. Okay, 10 by 10 on the floor, 6 high. That's how we've got that calculation. If it's more than 6 meters high, if you've got 12, you're probably going to need a second row of traps, okay, to help get that upper layer. Some of the positive traps, like here, I have to talk about Pest's product. So here we've got our Delta Stripe moth trap, and you can see that the number of moths caught over 1, 2, and 3 days. 1 day is green, 2 days is purple, blue is 3 days. It outcompetes other products on the market. And we think that's because of the stripes. Stripes are really good at attracting moths to the monitor. They actually act more as a beacon, and that's why a lot of our monitors will have the stripes in place. So there's that one, or if you haven't seen this one is also an excellent one, which can be used indoors and outdoors. Now, I know we probably don't think about it too much in the UK, putting them outdoors, but in some places in the world, or in summer in the UK, the moths can actually move out of the building. If you had one infestation in one area, they can move to another building or outside. Because it's round, it's omnidirectional, so you can get moths attracted all around it. They're hard wearing, they can be suspended high up in a building. They've got a long life lure of 12 weeks. Bayonet fitting, so it's for easy screw on, screw off. Good for dusty environments actually, because so you don't have to worry about the glue on it being covered in dust. It's got the lid on it. Can be used with a glue insert or a water detergent. I like the glue because then you can easily count what's been caught, but you can use detergent as well inside them, and that's like your way of catching the moths. Okay, so those are some of the products available, and I know I'm rapidly running out of time, but I do just want to talk about this. You can use the pheromones in different ways. So one of the ways you can use a pheromone is for mating disruption. And the idea is that you produce these pheromones and then it stops the males being able to find the females. Okay, if you have lots of decoy pheromones, when the male is searching for the female, it keeps getting confused. It goes, I know she's there somewhere, but he can't find her. Okay, and these are actually known to reduce the population of moths. And that's because if they can't find each other, then they can't mate and then they can't produce the next generation. There's 2 types out there. One is called dismate, and that kind of saturates the whole environment with the pheromone, makes it really hard for the male moth to find the female. There's also something called exosect or insect tract. It's got a few different names, but this one, it has this little chalk carrier, this little tablet you put in it, And when the male finds this pheromone, it then picks up the pheromone on itself. They're actually charged, so then they get onto the moth very quickly. And then he flies off, and then he also smells like a female moth. And so you get more confusion, you get more disruption, you end up with less moths being able to find each other for mating. Okay, so that is also a really, really good product to have that will help suppress the population, especially if you're struggling with like what insecticide treatments you can use. We're talking about like integrated pest management, trying to include as many tools as possible to help reduce the moths. Okay. And that's me it. That's me done. Here's like a little list at the end of like things I've talked about. Inspect thoroughly, locate breeding sites, monitors, think small, they're small insects, they don't need a lot of space. Remove anything infested. Oh, I hate it when they cordon off, they say, oh, that's infested. We put it nearby though, just in case. No, get it out the building. If it's infested, don't have it where it could end up infesting more product. And again, check site standards, only treat accordingly with the site standards. Okay, that's me done. Thank you very much. I hope you like the
Wonderful.
picture as well, the moth. That I like AI at the moment, it seems, but that's also AI putting a Christmas hat on a moth.
See, I'm mildly disappointed that that's not a genuine moth wearing a Christmas hat now.
I know. I can probably make it happen, but it just take a really, really small little hat to put on.
I mean, I'll pay to see a moth wearing a Christmas hat. I'm just saying.
What about a cockroach would be good as well, actually.
Yeah, cockroach.
Okay, there's my Christmas plans gone.
Mm. Well, that's an Australian cockroaches out the back. I wonder if I can nibble those.
Yeah,
Sorry, right, we've gone massively off course again. Christmas.
yeah.
Woohoo!
Christmas.
Um, excellent. So we do have a couple of questions. Obviously we are
Okay,
running a little bit slightly behind time. Would you mind popping into Q&A and just doing a typed answer for us? Would that be okay?
of course, I'm happy to do that.
Amazing.
We've got
Oh
some
yeah, quickly, the
as well.
pheromone traps only trap the males. It's actually, I think people don't think about it too much, but they're female pheromones, so actually they're really specific towards the males of the species to attract them. Yeah, there we go.
Wonderful. Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you again for Peltis for joining us. And I hope you have a lovely break when it comes, Sophie.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye
See you
everyone.
soon. Cheers. Bye.